As I dance on the spiral. Beautiful. Through the passage of these rites. We are just setting up the tech here and about to welcome in Jane Hardwicke Collins. So just make yourselves comfortable. Listen to the music. The bearing of these bones to the birthing waters, where I find myself reborn. I honor my lineage, as I honor my lineage, as I honor my lineage, just honor my lineage, as I dance on the spiral, through the passage of these rites, with the wisdom of the cycle, and the mother blood that gives me life, in the waking of her daughters, and the bearing of these bones to the birthing waters, where I find myself reborn. I honor my lineage. All right, we are live, baby. Feeling this music. Lineage, as I honor my lineage. Lineage, I honor my lineage. Lineage. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, for getting into that song as I introduce one of our incredibly special guests, Jane Hardwicke Collins, who has been a loyal supporter of the Rebel Ma Collective since the very beginning. And Jane actually wrote the foreword to our first book, Rebel Ma Rising in the Time of the Feminine. And she also taught us a beautiful rite of passage ceremony in the book, because her teachings very much influence and inspire the way that I teach my birthing a book, because it's like birthing a baby, because everything we do is like how we birth anything is how we birth everything. So I'm very excited to have Jane here today, who is a midwife, a teacher, a fierce keeper of women's wisdom, and whose work has touched the lives of thousands, if not millions, of women around the world. Jane is the founder of the School of Shamanic Womancraft, and it's a global mystery school devoted to the reclamation of feminine rites of passage and cyclical wisdom. And she's also just launched a woman craft way, which is a community that people can join her on the regular to, you know, learn from her wisdom and to embody it as we move through our lives. So I'm very excited to have Jane here today, who for decades has stood at the threshold, you know, moments of women's lives as a midwife, a mentor, and a priestess, guiding us back to the sacred intelligence of our bodies and the deep remembering that lives in the feminine lineage. Like we heard, and she helped me birth my babies peacefully and powerfully too, through her shamanic pregnancy workshops and learning from her wisdom. It's just such an honor to have you here today.
Oh, thank you, Saoirse. Thank you so much. And congratulations on yet again an amazing Rebel Mars Summit. Like, you really are working for the goddess. Thank you so much.
Yes, yes, beautiful. And let us call on the goddess now and the guardians of the gateways to support us in our teachings today. And yeah, I will hand over the mic to you and let you do what you do and guide us through this beautiful dismantling of the internalized patriarchy, sorry, and reclaiming the feminine wisdom from within. It's the day of the
Oh.
rebel matriarch. So I'd love you to, tell us what that maybe brings up for you, what that means for you, as we all get to embody that archetype now moving forward in our lives.
Well, I think it's just exactly what we need to do right now. We look at the state of the world, and you and I were having a little conversation online before about what would be something that I could offer and say as a important thing to do right now. And I think it's about leadership. I think that the world's leadership is showing us some things that are quite remiss. And what I would like to suggest that the humans most primed for leadership, the humans who are the most calm, non-reactive, the humans that have hindsight and foresight and long-term thinking and solution-focused problem solving, are the ones that should be doing the leadership. And they are the postmenopausal women. They are the ones who are primed for leadership, and they are the ones who will hold mothers and children at the center, which is really the biggest thing we need to heal in this culture. But we're not going to be able to do anything in terms of shifting the paradigm or dismantling the patriarchy until we dismantle our internalized patriarchy, not just in the mind, but in the body. So my session today is to help us recognize where and how we have internalized the patriarchy and what to do about it. So we all have internalized the patriarchy, I'm sorry to tell you, but it's not possible that we haven't. We were all raised by a mother who was raised by a mother in the patriarchy, who was raised by a mother in the patriarchy for eons. So this is something that just exists, and all our rites of passage, so our own birth, how we were born, our menarche, our first menstrual period, the beginning of our menstrual cycle, the beginning of our fertility, our initiation into womanhood, our first consensual sexual experience, and then every pregnancy results in a birth. Whatever finishes the pregnancy is a birth, whether that's a loss or an abortion. And then menopause, and then our transition into the winter season of our lives of crone at 70, and then our death. All these rites of passage happen within a patriarchy. And the way rites of passage work is that whatever happens teaches you how to behave in the culture to be accepted in that new role. So all of our rites of passage have reinforced patriarchal values and created in us our behavior to be aligned with that. So we live in a negative menstrual cycle culture, a negative childbirth culture, and a negative menopause culture. And our bodies and the natural processes of our body, menstrual cycle, menstruation, pregnancy, childbirth, and mothering, and then our menopausal process, the process of going through menopause, none of these are trusted. They are all controlled. And our body's natural processes have been pathologized, medicalized, monetized, and weaponized against us. So our culture disregards cycles, yet our bodies run on cycles, and we're taught to ignore them. And the patriarchy doesn't do cycles, it just does the ascent and the peak and the 24/7 availability and the instant gratification and availability right here, right now, all the time, and constant growth. Now, look, there is actually nothing in nature that's healthy that just keeps growing. So we need to remember that, because our patriarchal culture is fixated on youth and beauty and growth over and on and on and on and on. So that's just the ascent of the cycle. And we have been encouraged to ignore the cycle because it doesn't actually play out in the patriarchy. So we have been raised to have menstrual shame. That's actually what we're initiated into at menarche, our first period. And menstrual shame leads to body shame. And body shame leads to all manner of wounded behaviors, including low self-esteem, wounded behaviors such as self-harm, eating disorders, and risky and dangerous sexual decision making. And she who was initiated into womanhood at Menarche is the woman that shows up to give birth, completely enculturated into how she's supposed to behave as a woman to be accepted in the culture. One rite of passage leads to the next. So our beliefs, attitudes, and fears about ourselves and our roles and the value of us in that new role all come from these rites of passage. All done in a patriarchal world, all done in a negative menstrual cycle culture, negative childbirth, negative menopause culture. And then all those attitudes, beliefs, and fears translate into our bodies, our behavior, and therefore in our relationships and our spirituality. And, so sad, we are encouraged to compete with each other, to compare ourselves to each other, to criticize each other, and to judge each other. And this creates what's called the wounded sisterhood. And this keeps us separated and against each other. So this is a tragedy. And this is something that, as well as dismantling our internalized patriarchy, is the role of our time. I mean, healing the sisterhood is part of dismantling the patriarchy, but that's something we can do every day in every interaction, in our family, in our work, in all of our relationships. And it's about not being the one that keeps participating in the comparison, the criticism, the judging, and all of that. Like, be the one that says, I don't want to do that anymore. It doesn't feel right to me to be criticizing her or gossiping about her or whatever. Like, be the one that says, no, I want to live in the healed sisterhood. And this might get some weird looks and, oh, what's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me. I am going to make the effort and then enjoy the healed sisterhood. And I encourage you to do it with me. Imagine that. So that's one of our missions. So everybody going forward. Now, the other thing that's so tragic is that we have not only internalized the patriarchy through our beliefs, attitudes, and fears that result from our rites of passage, but we have internalized it in our bodies, mostly without even realizing it. Now, our body parts, many of our body parts, particularly those to do with the reproductive system, are all named after the men who discovered them. Now, I really just want to say to those of you who are hearing this for the first time that I'm really sorry to have to bring this to you, but it's what we need to know. It's part of dismantling our internalized patriarchy, is to be aware of just how embedded it is. So I'm just going to go through some of our body parts that are named after the men who discovered them. It's a bit like the moon, it's got a flag in it saying the country that landed here. So think of your body with all these flags in it that have a man's name on it because he discovered it. I don't know about you, but that doesn't feel real good to me. So sorry to be the bearer of this horrible news, but I'm just going to give you some of the names now. And this will probably come as a surprise to many of you because we just adopt the language and think it's just what it is. But let's start with our fallopian tubes. Now those parts of us, those oviducts as they actually are, that's their kind of anatomical name, was named after Gabriele Falippio, the physician who discovered the fallopian tubes. And then there's Bartholin's glands, named after Caspar Bartholin the Younger, a physician and anatomist. Now, our Bartholin's glands, you might even not even know there's such a thing, but you would know them if they got blocked because it's very, very painful and sadly an experience that many of us have. And they lie just beneath the skin at our labia minora, so the inside lips of our vulva, and they're not visible from the outside unless they're swollen or infected. But what they do is they secrete fluid that helps lubricate the vaginal opening during sexual arousal. So they're named after good old Caspar Bartholin. And then, and I think this is the one that so many women just go, oh no, the G-spot. The G-spot is named after Ernst Grafenberg, who discovered this very highly sensitive area on the anterior vaginal wall in our body, and not a simple structure and quite mysterious for many, but named after a man, good old Ernst. And then continuing on with some other gynecological aspects of us, Skane's glands. Now, Alexander Skane, a gynecologist, discovered these, and these are on the front of our vaginal wall, around our urethra where the urine comes out. And these release fluid at high arousal, the female ejaculation, as many of you will have heard of, perhaps experienced. Alexander Skane discovered that part of us. And then in the ovary, there's the Grafen follicle, named after Rainer de Graaf, who found it. And then the Gartner's ducts, which are other things inside our vagina. And then this place that lay behind our womb and in front of our bowel. And it's a potential space. So it's the space where if there's fluid in your abdomen that it collects there. And that is called the pouch of Douglas. Can you believe that? The pouch of Douglas. You know, like, I just get the fuck out of my pouch, Douglas. This is not your territory. Excuse me for that swearing, but you can imagine, as I'm imagining your feeling at the idea of all these parts named for these men who discovered them. And you know how they discovered them? You know, that part of the story is really bad. Doing post-mortem, not autopsies, but cutting women up and finding all the bits and having the flags nearby to stick in them. And there's even some more dodgy information about how they got the dead bodies, but we won't go there now. And then on our breasts. So you know those beautiful little lumps around your nipple? They're called Montgomery's tubercles, because dear old William Featherstone Montgomery was an Irish obstetrician who put his flag in them. And then there are the ligaments that actually hold our breasts in place. Good old Sir Astley Cooper discovered them. And then there's more, but that's enough for now. And I'm sure many of you know this, but again, I'm really sorry if this is the first time you're hearing it, but vagina means sheath for a sword. So just take a breath in now and just have a nice big sigh to let all of that out. It represents a dark history of medicine and an unconscious internalized patriarchy where we call very important parts of our bodies after the men who discovered them. So it's really time that we reclaim our lives and decolonize our minds and our bodies. And rename our body parts. So, you know, we just got to start using new words. And when those of you who are mothers teaching children, use the right words to describe what they are, rather than to be named after the men who discovered them. I mean, that's pretty advanced anatomy and physiology, but if those of you who are teachers, maybe you could introduce this into your teaching programs, or those of you who are midwives or nurses, when you refer to women's body parts, like, you know, you could even just highlight it and say, this is named after a man. Did you know that? The women need to know this. So important. So in decolonizing our minds and our bodies, I just want to go a little deeper and feel what an internalized patriarchy looks like, feels like. So I'm going to describe some ways that the internalized patriarchy might look like in our minds. So maybe just close your eyes, and as I say this, I'm just going to give you a list. Just think about, if you've got a pen and paper there too, you might just want to, I don't know, maybe I can send these through another way, but remember the ones that are in you so you can let go of them. So you don't have to close your eyes if you don't want to, but that sometimes helps me concentrate. Maybe that's not the same for everybody. But I just want to talk about now what an internalized patriarchy looks like in terms of our mind. The needing permission or external authority to trust oneself. Measuring our worth through productivity, usefulness, or service. Fear of being too much or not enough. Dismissal of our intuition in favour of experts. We do live in the cult of the expert, which is one of the terms one of my teachers, my dear and departed teacher Janine Pavati Baker, she used to always say we live in the cult of the expert, and that the side effect of that is that we think that it's the experts who know everything rather than, and therefore we discount our internalized knowing, which is not appropriate. And it's not to disrespect experts, they're wonderful when you need them, but they have a reductionist perspective. They see things as an expert does, in its minute detail. But often what gets forgotten is the holistic perspective. And we all know that anything without the holistic perspective is not whole, and therefore probably not as good as it could be or as useful as it could be. So back to this, what the internalized patriarchy can look like in our mind. So I just said dismissal of intuition in favour of experts. Chronic self-surveillance and self-correction. So how often do you do that? Monitoring what you say to make sure that nobody's going to pick up that you messed up and didn't follow the way. Another one is equating rest as laziness. As our darling, and I know she was part of this summit this time, Uma Dunsmore Tully says that rest is a revolutionary and rebellious act. How insane is that? That's got to be one of the biggest clues that we could ever have to see that how the patriarchy is not serving us. If rest is, well, not valued, not encouraged, but to do so is a revolutionary act. Okay, another one, aging framed as decline rather than initiation. And we're seeing that so prevalently in all the conversations about menopause right now, in the media or social media, where there's such a focus on this massive rite of passage in our lives that is actually an honor to have the opportunity to navigate. And aging is a privilege, not something to avoid. Here I am at the end of the autumn of my life. I turned 68 this year, so I'm 67 3/4. And many of my friends and from my growing up circles, so many people my age are beginning to die and get sick. So for those of us who are well, that's not a given. It's a gift. Perhaps it's the result of many things you've done to invest in your wellness and your health, but to negate aging and to think of that as something to avoid is just to my mind, really dumb and not honouring exactly what aging is, a privilege and a role to play in a community that's really necessary. More on what the internalized patriarchy might look like in our mind. Internalized competition with women. So here's that whole wounded sisterhood thing. And, in a patriarchy, the women who have been able to rise to the top in corporations or government or any of those places that there's a lot of competition with men, have really had to prove themselves to be better than men to be able to get those big jobs. And so being better than a man, sadly, in this world doesn't actually mean being a woman. It means being a better man. And they've done well to get where they've got. And I acknowledge that and give thanks for them being in those roles. But I give thanks for the time when women can rise to power and leadership, when they are coming from the feminine, from their woman's self, because that's a lot more complex, not complicated, complex than the male experience, and something that needs to be taken into great consideration, especially now since it hasn't been taken into consideration much at all before. And there we have the wounded sisterhood. And then one more, harshness where tenderness is needed. So how you talk to yourself. You lazy thing, get up your ass. You haven't got time to rest. You have got so much work to do. And look at the state of your house. And look at the washing pile. Where are your children? How long since you've had a meeting with your team? All the stuff, I think if there's one thing we might take from this in terms of how to dismantle the patriarchy in our own mind, would be to listen to how you speak to yourself. I'll hazard a guess, if you're anything like me, you wouldn't talk to anybody how you talk to yourself. It can be quite atrocious at times, the way we talk to ourselves. So that would be one way to really begin here, is to treat yourself the way you would like to be treated, and also probably how you treat other people. Okay. So I want to move on now to give you some suggestions for how an internalized patriarchy might look like in our body. So we just did the mind, now we're going to do the body. So holding your belly in, collapsing your chest and restricting your breath. How many young women have you seen walking around like that? I mean, especially the ones whose bosoms form before the others, or the ones who are subject to way too much male gaze. They just, like that. And, sometimes you grow up and stand up straight, but often not. Another way it shows up in our body is the chronic tension in the jaw and the solar plexus and the pelvic floor, like on guard as if, and guarding, but holding the tension. And then, here's one. Overriding hunger, overriding fatigue, overriding our cyclical needs, and overriding pain or pleasure. How many times have you pushed yourself through? How many times have you had to ignore the pain, ignore the fatigue, and just are too busy to eat something, or there's not the right food there? This is not a way to be healthy. Another thing is treating the body as an object rather than a being. And of course, that's what happens in a patriarchy, the objectification of women. More in our body, fear of our blood, our fluids, our smells, and our aging flesh. Now, all the wrinkles and all of that, so what? Just get over it. As I said, it's an honor. And the changes in our body as we age, we've got this arm situation. It's got some derogatory thing, what they call it, tuck shop arm. But, many people don't even know what a tuck shop is anymore, but it's just the old lady arm. My two youngest grandchildren just love to sit beside me and play with this part of my arm and say, "Oh, Grandma, you're so soft." Or, "Why are you so squishy?" And whenever I tell that story, there are so many women who remember doing that with their grandma. Just to be that soft place And our bellies get soft. Our bellies are meant to be soft, not abs. Our bellies are meant to be soft. And, I'm thinking as a grandmother that just makes me much more comfortable. Comfortable to be sat upon. So, we really just have to get over this idea that the patriarchy gives us that beauty has one way, and it's pretty much the 25-year-old female. The beautiful young creature who's basically sexually available. And that as we age, we don't stay looking like 25. And there is so much money spent on that. And there is so much trauma around that and so much low self-esteem. And it's all about the male gaze. And then how we have internalized the male gaze. It's not possible to look like a 25-year-old for the rest of your life, nor is it appropriate. So, as my husband has said to me often, especially around me heading off on a big teaching trip with way too many bags, he says to me, act your age and ask for help. So I think that's what we need to do as we age. We need to act our age, not try to be 25 or even 35 or even 45 when you're 55, 65, 75. It's just so crazy, and it's how we support the patriarchy, by spending all this money on it, by fearing what we look like, by covering ourselves up in all the ways so that we won't be embarrassed. Embarrassed? By who? For what? So, you can tell that I feel very passionate about this, because I think it's just so rude that we feel that we need to modify ourselves for the male gaze. Okay, back to the ways the internalized patriarchy shows up in our body. Here, sexual performance rather than embodied eroticism. That's a thing. Another one, discomfort in taking up space. Distrust of cyclical energy in your body. Look, we've been encouraged to ignore and reject our menstrual cycle right from the beginning when we start. The amount of teenage girls that get put on the pill, the oral contraceptive pill, that is so famous it's just called the pill. All these young teenagers who are still developing get put on the pill for things like acne or irregular cycles, which are actually the norm when you first start, or pain, which is a sign that something is amiss in the body and needs attention, not covering up. So being distrustful of our menstrual cycle is something that is pretty inherent in being female these days. And our menstrual cycle is really not to be ignored. And if you do ignore her, she'll do whatever she has to do to get your attention. And that's what pain looks like. That's what discomfort, mood swings, all the things, The menstrual cycle is a stress-sensitive system. So anything that is causing you stress in your life, or any toxins in your life, whether that's what you eat or breathe or drink or the people toxic relationships, it will all show up in your menstrual cycle so that you will do something about it. And the amount of menstrual cycle pathology in this world today is tragic. When we look at the modern woman and the metrics used to define well-being, we are in a really bad state. In Australia, which is just another example of a modern Western world in terms of obstetrics and maternity care, only about 48% of women, so less than half of the women, actually push their babies out of their vaginas now. That is ridiculous. That is a sign of way too much intervention, unnecessary intervention. Caesarean rates all around the world just keep going and going up, up, up. And so this is not getting better. This is continuing to get worse. And the people that suffer in the unnecessary intervention at birth in the attempt to control it are the babies that are being born and the mothers who are giving birth. Because the more intervention, like if we need intervention, we give great thanks. But that's a minority. But the majority are experiencing it these days. The induction rates are ridiculous. You know, babies initiate labour. So that's the time when labour is meant to happen, is when the baby is ready. Inductions of labour are so often done for no medical reason. And it tips the woman into a well-known phenomena that's got its own name in midwifery and obstetrics, unnecessary intervention, any intervention. It leads to what's called the cascade of intervention. Like once you fiddle with something, then the next thing needs to be fiddled with, and then the next thing, and then you're making the contractions stronger and more frequent, and then the baby gets into distress, and then, you have to have an emergency cesarean. So lucky you're here. You know, and out of those women giving birth in Australia, in New South Wales actually, which again is just another example, 1 in 3 women experience birth trauma. And birth trauma is not something that gets diagnosed. It's a self-diagnosis. It's when women know that they're traumatized by it. So 1 in 3 have birth trauma, and 1 in 10 of that 1 in 3 have PTSD from their birth experience, which is a brain injury that creates flashbacks. And that is not a very nice place to start mothering from, traumatic birth. And would you believe that 70% of the trauma happening in birth trauma, 70% is caused by the practitioners delivering the care. So the doctors and the midwives. Now that sounds terrible, and it is terrible, but it's actually good because we can fix that. And why that is so is because these people who work in the birth world are overworked, underpaid, super stressed, and not supported. And they are mostly full of fear and therefore in fight or flight at the bedside, and anybody in fight or flight does not have the headspace to be able to be gentle, kind, and respectful. They're just barking orders because that's all the fight or flight will allow one to do. So we need to care for the birth workers as well as change the choices that we make. So that's really important. You know, there's too much us and them in birth, like making doctors and midwives evil. They're not evil. They're stressed and they're not behaving from their full capacity, and they need support. And I'm not saying that what they do is good or bad. It's just the way that it is, and we all need to take responsibility for the situation. And what that might look like as a mother with birth trauma is complaining. Not just whinging to your friends, but making a formal complaint to the hospital, to the practitioner, or the governmental body that's responsible for screening and accepting complaints from healthcare stuff. So, you know, if they don't get feedback, they won't know that they need to change. Now, other things in our body, one more, somatic self-policing. So policing yourself, your body, before anyone else does. Suck in your tummy, stand up straight, speak sweetly. You know, you probably can remember the things maybe your mother said to you. Those will be the things. And then what the internalized patriarchy can look like in our behavior. Overgiving, overcoping. I'm good at that one. Overcoping. Compulsive apologizing. I'm sure many of you sit with women in circles or other kinds of gatherings. In the ones that I've been in recently, we make a deal at the beginning, an agreement. Stop saying sorry. And then everybody starts to notice how often they say sorry when they walk in front of someone. If they speak, if they do, it's just notice how often you say sorry when you don't need to say sorry. That's one of the internalized patriarchal effects in our behavior. Here's another one. Explaining rather than embodying. Staying quiet when boundaries are crossed. You know, I'll just wear it. Doesn't really matter. Just stay quiet. Staying busy to avoid feeling. Pushing through the body's no. You know, I heard a great thing, and I'm sure all of you already know this anyway, but if it's not a fuck yeah, it's a no. And just remember that with your body as well. Judging other women is that behavior. Abandoning creative impulses. That's a bit sad. And seeking approval before action. You know, there's that saying, has he got the balls for it? Like, have we got the ovaries to stand in our power? I think we have to. And we'll be able to if we support each other. And then here's what it looks like, the internalized patriarchy, what that looks like in our relationships. Being a good girl. Being a strong woman. And being in self-sacrificing roles. Fear of female anger in relationship. Competition over collaboration. Mothering our partners. Sexualizing oneself rather than inhabiting oneself. Experiencing difficulty receiving. Here's one. Feeling responsible for others' emotions. I mean, we probably taught that as little girls too. And then in relationship, the wounded sisterhood dynamic. And then here's what it looks like in our spirituality. Transcending the body instead of inhabiting her. Light over dark. Rising above instead of descending in. Obedience over inner authority. External gurus over our own inner knowing. And healing framed as fixing instead of remembering. So with all that, I just want to offer a few questions to each of you. And then the answers to this question is what we'll take into the next part of my presentation here with you. And I invite you to think of one or more belief, judgment, and fear that you're ready to let go of. So think of a belief, a judgment, could be a self-judgment, or of others. Belief, judgment, and fear. So have a think about at least one of those that you're ready to let go of. So whilst you do that, I'm just going to drum a little bit so you can focus. Focus on one belief, one fear, and one judgment. So gather those in your mind right now. Write them down if you can. Have them present. And if you can't remember all of them, don't worry, remember one. And since you've recalled them, they'll be present in your consciousness anyway. And what we're going to do now together, so if any of you are listening to this recording and you're driving, don't do this while you're driving. Press pause now and come back and do it. Recall those things you're ready to let go of in your mind. And I invite you to locate where they are in your body. Feel where the patriarchy is within you, in your body. And I'm going to drum a bit more. And with this process, I invite you to go to the part of your body where you know the belief lives, or the fear lives, or the judgment sits. And I will be drumming while you're doing this. And then you have the opportunity to let that go. And the way you can do that, there's a myriad of ways to do it, but what I'm suggesting we do now is to locate wherever that fear, judgment, or belief sits in your body. And it will probably be associated with some sort of physical discomfort. That would be the clue. And then you decide you want to release it, let it go, and to do that with some kind of movement. So you might want to stand up, or it's fine if you're sitting down. But when you engage with what the part of your body that is holding one of these things you're ready to let go of, see what movement your body wants you to do to release it. So I'll just give you an example. So if you've got a really tight, sore shoulder, and you go there in this process, and you're able to see or feel what's there. See if there's a fear, a belief, or a judgment that you want to let go of. And then maybe there's some sort of movement your shoulder wants you to do to release it. Now, I don't know what it will be. Or maybe there's a sound you need to make to release it. But the most important thing with this is that you tell your part of your body that that's what you're doing. And you say, with this sound or with this movement, I release this from my body. Okay? So I'm hoping you might be able to do this a few times whilst I'm drumming. Maybe if you only do it once, that's fine. You'll know the process and the procedure, and you can do it again whenever you like, at any time. So I'll just repeat it just to be clear. Just hold in your mind the belief, the judgment, the fear that you want to let go of that represents some aspect of an internalized patriarchy. And while I drum, to do a body scan basically, and go to the parts of your body that are calling your attention, and that might be through pain or tension or tightness or hot or cold or pain. You'll know it'll be something you've been nursing for a long time, no doubt, or it'll be something new that you can't ignore. And then when you get there, just check in and see whether the belief, fear, or judgment sits there, and then say, I release that with this movement, and you'll be intuitive about the movement, or I release it with this sound. Okay, so you might want to make sure you're on mute, and if you can stand up, that would be great, but you know what you want to do right now. Just get yourself ready, and I'm going to drum for a little while you do this. And then when it's time to come, the drumming is going to sound like this. And when it's time to finish this process, I'll change the drumming to this. And then I'll talk you back. So everybody take in a big breath and out. And say to yourself 3 times, not out loud, I clear myself of all negative energy. Now say to yourself 3 times, I am traveling around my body to release my internalized patriarchy. Say something like that 3 times. Now, if you encounter anything that confuses you or worries you or scares you, all you have to do is ask, are you for my highest good? If it is, it will stay, and you can say, okay, what are you here to teach me or tell me? If it's not for your highest good, it will disappear. So just practice saying that in your mind, and don't hesitate to use it, because if it's for your highest good, it will stay. Are you for my highest good? Okay. You are traveling into your body to release your internalized patriarchy. Standing or sitting and moving, doing your body scan and releasing with sound or movement. Okay, coming back into presence here now. Remember, you can go back and do that every 5 minutes if you want to. And just shake now, shake your body, shake it all out, bring it to the surface. Give it back to the mother, wipe it down, give it back to the mother, Mother Earth. She'll just turn it into food and nourish whatever's growing next. So coming to some stillness now as you can. And now gather a few words in your mind that represent how it feels to reclaim your body, mind, and spirit from the patriarchy. What are some few words that represent that? And get them into your mind, and now put them in your body. So say the words over and over in your mind while you move your body in whatever way you want to, so that it goes in. You know, maybe you want to do some body percussion. Maybe you want to rub some part of you, like whatever. Say the words that represent what it feels like to reclaim your body, mind, and spirit from the patriarchy, and put them in your body. And that way you don't have to worry about forgetting them, because they'll be in your body. Stroke yourself with these new feelings, the feeling that it feels like to reclaim your body, your mind, and your spirit. Put it in. Put it in you. That's it. Lovely. All the places, all the places, all the places. And let's seal that with a hum. So make a hum, and send that all the way through your body. Beautiful. Now let's all just come back, focus here. We've got to bring ourselves here now in this new version of us. Make sure you're all together. Put yourself together. And let's just do horse lips. Yeah. Feeling yourself land deeper and deeper in your body here. Just relaxing all the tight bits. Tend to the parts of your body that were getting your attention before. Just kindness, and repeat the words, the new words. So please, as I said, do this every 5 minutes if you can. If something arises for you where you think, oh my God, why do I think like that? Then think, where is that in my body? And then go to that part of your body and ask her, what do you need me to do to release this? And then do it. And then send a soothing hum to that part of your body. And then put your new feelings of what it feels like to have released that into your body. Simple, simple, simple. And journal it. Like, talk about it, share it with your friends. Like, do this work. You know, this is the important part of the inner work we need to do, is to dismantle our internalized patriarchy. Because we ain't going to shift anything if we're operating as individual versions of the patriarchy. So this is actually our responsibility to do this. And dismantling and the internalized patriarchy and reclaiming ourselves will not only heal you, it will also heal your red thread, your mother line, your female ancestry, before and after you. So you're not just doing this for you, you're doing this for all your relations. So good on you. And as we come to the end of my session now, I just want to really make sure that everybody is fully present and in your body, ready to do whatever else you need to do. Let's rub our hands together. Put that on your face. Rub it again. Put it on your heart. And rub again and put on your womb or your energetic womb space. If you don't have a womb anymore, you still have the energetic womb space. So maybe leave one hand on your womb, one hand back on your heart. And maybe you could just repeat to yourself the words that came up for you about how it feels to have the patriarchy leaving your body. Some words might be sovereignty, embodiment, reclamation of my voice. Like whatever it is, just say that now, anchoring it in this time, in this place, right here, right now, within the Rebel Ma summit of matriarchy now. These are the versions of ourselves that need to show up. Nothing less will do. And you are the future ancestors of the children yet to be born. Be one of those women that they look back at and thank for doing the changes that needed to be done. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much, Saoirse, and everybody who's made this possible.
Oh, thank you so much, Jane.